Hello, hello. How are you? We're live. This is Linda Downey, and this is an episode of the Unconditioned Life. And this is exciting because this is a new podcast for me this year. Started last week, so we're just a couple of episodes in. But today's episode, we're going to talk about the missing link for you, whether it's in your health or something going on in your life, but there's a missing link I think that you may not realize is having as big an impact as it can have. So before we dive in, if you're listening, this is streaming in multiple places. Please say hello. I do go back and check the comments later. So I'm so happy to see where you're listening from. You can say where you live if you want to do that. And then I'm just going to dive in now, talking about the missing link for, I'm going to relate it to health because that is my background, but it's not just health. It's actually anywhere in your life. So before I tell you what it is, I want to tell you how I got to this place. So my journey in my life and my background has been a struggle with health in particular, but also with relationships, I'm not going to lie, a struggle with health and relationships a lot of my adult life. My health issues started in my 20s, in my early 20s, and I was diagnosed with multiple, hi Sandra. Sandra says hi good day from Wisconsin. Thank you for saying hi, Sandra. Welcome. So I struggled with many health issues starting in my 20s, ulcerative colitis, thyroid autoimmune issues, things like that. Hey, Facebook user. Thank you for saying hi. And also in my personal life, besides my health, there was a lot of issues in my marriage. My marriage didn't last. And I can go into a little bit more about that. But throughout the course of that, my root passion was health and wellness. I have a master's in physiology. I was working in health and wellness, corporate wellness, my own personal training business in my 20s. And really that was my passion. And I was so stuck in my own health. So I've been on a journey to figure out how to shift that, how to get past it. What do I need to do to be well? And in the course of that journey, I became a functional health practitioner. I was working with other people who had chronic health issues, chronic fatigue, autoimmune, all of that, migraines, pain. And I improved myself to a great degree, and my clients had great results, but they didn't always last. They didn't always last, or it wasn't to the degree that I wanted. And I kept looking like, what is the thing? Because we're doing the gut, we're doing the liver, we're doing this and that in my personal life, we're doing therapy, we're doing all of the things that we know to do. And a few years back, a friend of mine, Kelly, sent me to a guy, Phil Kaplan. He's all over the internet. He was actually a friend of hers, Phil Kaplan, in health and wellness. But she's like, listen, he's got this new technology and maybe he can help you. It's so amazing. So I contacted Phil and I did a test run with him. And the technology, when I say a test run, I did a session with him. The technology that he used is actually being used by NASA right now. It's really about the energy, our life force energy, the energy field that we connect to. And he gave me back some amazing information. And I was blown away, to be honest. I was blown away by what I learned, what he was able to tell me about me. And he didn't know anything about me, but it all was around my energy, my connection to the energy field. And that connection really has a lot to do with our own spirit, because that's where we really connect to the energy field. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. So in this field of energy, if you're thinking, what is that? What are we talking about? If 100 years ago, I said to you, do you need to go out and hitch up your horse to your cart before we go, or you need to light the oil lamps in the house? It would be a yes, because that was the level that technology was at 100 years ago. It didn't mean that we didn't have the capability to have cars. We just didn't know about it 100 years ago. We didn't know about electricity. But the ability existed, right? So the same thing today, we are finally getting the ability. That's why NASA is using this technology. We're getting the ability to see our energy and to see how it affects our lives and our health and everything else in our life, because we have the technology now to see it and understand it, but it's always been there. And in fact, we have been learning about it throughout the ages. People like Jesus spoke about it in the Bible. Other cultures, other wisdom, Sophocles, Hippocrates, many, many wise people throughout the ages have been talking about this exact thing. And it really is our energy and our spirit. So let me go back to the story with Phil Kaplan. So Phil does a session with me and he gives me information back and he says, this is what I see. I see there's a lot of anger. You have grief. There's a lot of grief that's stuck in your energy field. He said there is a place in, like, spiritually where you're really blocking love. And again, he didn't know anything about me, but I'm going to tell you something about me. My marriage was failing. My husband was having an affair and I knew about it. My daughter, at the time she was still alive, but my daughter had been struggling with catastrophic health issues. She did pass a few years ago. So at the time she was still alive, but I always felt helpless and out of control and upset and fearful. So he didn't ask me any of that. There was nothing that I filled out about my history, about my personal life, about my own health. Oh, he also said you have autoimmune disease, which I did. So he was able to tell my autoimmune conditions, my lack of feeling control in my life, the anger and the fear that I was holding around my daughter and around my marriage. He gave me this whole printout. And that's when I went back to him then and I said, how do you know this? How did you figure this out? Because who I am is, where's the missing link? What's the next thing I need to learn? What haven't I learned yet that would make the difference? So he was very kind to share a lot of that information with me, which he probably doesn't normally do with regular clients, but he did. And he told me about, he's like, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really know how it works. I know this is technology that NASA is using, but it's all about the energy. And you have, I can see it from your session, you have the stored energy of anger, fear, loss, sadness. And I can see in the energy field how it's affecting your body and that your immune system is not working the way it should be working. And it was clear that that was pointing to autoimmune conditions. So he said to me, you may want to do some work on spiritual healing. So I was doing all of the, as I said, gut cleanses, masters in physiology, right? I was learning about diet. I was doing all the different diets, liver detoxing, changing my exercise. I took a whole year-long course in hormones, just hormones, because I was at that age, or getting close to that age where that was a problem. So I had done it all. And when he said to me, you need to look spiritually and look at where you're wounded and how you're holding these emotions, that's going to make the difference. So I listened because he blew my mind with the information that he came to me. So he had my attention and I listened. And so again, because who I am is what's the missing link, I went to work on where I was wounded spiritually. Where and when did that happen and how did I need to fix it? So I got someone to work with me who was a mentor to me and worked with me very closely. I spent about a year healing whatever came up in the course of the work together with that mentor. And you know what happened? Well, what happened is my daughter eventually died, and I was able to navigate that in a hugely different way. My body started to get better. So instead of needing, I still had needed to manage my diet closely. If you have autoimmune conditions, you know there's the gluten-free and the dairy-free and you can't have this and the elimination. And I was doing cleanses all the time. And there still is, something that we all need to do to manage our physical body, right? You can't just eat crap and, not pay attention to that. But I had to live very strictly to manage how I felt and to manage the autoimmunity. And I started to notice that my body could handle things differently. My body, my sleep, I used to have chronic pain. All of that started to shift throughout the year that I was doing the work on the spirituality part. So when I completed that, I wanted to learn how to do that with my clients. And so then I spent the next year and a half in training on how do I help people? How do we figure that out? How do I learn that? And so that was my whole journey, right, on how I got there. And so here's what I want you to know. The missing link, whether it's a health issue for you, if you've had a health journey like mine, where you've spent a lot of time and energy and effort trying to feel better because mostly you felt terrible, exhausted, a body that didn't work in the way that you wanted it to. I could function out in the world, but I didn't feel good a lot of the time. So if that's been your journey, or if you've had really hard circumstances, really hard things, like in a relationship, like marriage, or in some other way, or loss, any of it, right? What I learned in that training, after I started to see the results of the healing, after I got the amazing information from someone that had never met me, who didn't know anything about my life, but was able to tell that I was wounded spiritually. Once I did those steps, what I learned is that really every problem that we have, every lack of success, if you're not successful, if the diets don't work, if the therapy doesn't work, whatever it is that's not working, it's related to a deficit of love somewhere in your spirit around that issue. So let me say it again. It's related to a deficit of love somewhere in your spirit related to that issue. When we have a deficit of love, the result is we have fear. They are the opposite. When we're having fear, we're not having love. So if we're having less love, it's because fear is present. For me, fear was very much present since I was a little girl. And so when fear is present, the fear response is also called the stress response. We go into stress mode when we're fearful, right? That's what happens. So the fear response is the stress response. And I knew with my master's in physiology and my training as a functional health practitioner, I knew the ways that would show up in the physical body, like the nervous system being triggered on. And I knew that, and it made sense to me, and I knew how to help the nervous system and how to calm down the nervous system. What I had not yet learned, which is what made the difference, was why did that happen? Why was my nervous system, why might your nervous system be staying in that fear response when there's nothing chasing me? I'm not about to be killed, yet I'm in fear response. Now, when you have circumstances in your life, like a daughter who's in the hospital all the time, that's scary. So there was a lot of reasons in different parts of my life to be fearful. But the autoimmunity started in my 20s, right? The health issues started in my 20s. That came from a fear response in my life that started in an alcoholic childhood, growing up as a child in an alcoholic household. That triggered my nervous system. So I don't know what's triggered your nervous system. I don't know what you might be fearful about, but if you are experiencing something that's not working, look to see, where is my spirit wounded? Where am I protecting? Where am I withholding love because I was hurt before? Where am I telling myself I don't deserve love because I made a decision about myself? Where am I guarded from pain? A painful past experience. Where am I guarded? Where am I withholding? What am I telling myself? Because that's the place where our spirit gets wounded. Our spirit and our spiritual heart, so not your actual physical heart that's pumping your blood, but your spiritual heart, which is a huge, huge part of who you are. Your spiritual heart actually tells your brain what to think. It's your spiritual heart where all of your memories are stored. It's your spiritual heart. When something happened when you were 5 years old, that memory is stored in your spiritual heart. You may not be remembering it up here, or maybe if you thought about it, it might be like, oh yeah, that did happen. But it's not something you're consciously thinking about, but it is stored in your spiritual heart. That's your memory holder. That's like your data bank. Everything that ever happened, everything that you ever thought about is stored there. Nothing is ever forgotten. And if it was impactful enough to cause fear, if it was impactful enough to trigger a response, it's definitely still in there, and it's impacting how your spirit and how your nervous system, how your physical body are working together. So I hope that makes sense. Let me talk about it a little more. But if you have any questions, if you're like, I don't really understand, please put it in the comments so I can use this opportunity to try to get your questions answered right away. But your spiritual heart is where your memories are held. It's also your imagination, the connection to your imagination. And think of imagination as image maker, your image maker. So the way that you imagine things for your future, your image maker, the way that you see things, that's your images, the way that you see your life, the way that you imagine your life to be is based on the memories that are held in your spiritual heart. So for instance, growing up in an alcoholic household, a spiritual memory that I have is I'm not important here. Because when there's an alcoholic adult, they're very much preoccupied with their life, with alcohol, certainly the children, and it shows up in different ways. My household was not violent. It wasn't like it was a violent alcoholic household, but it was a missing parent alcoholic household. Oh, and by the way, my mother died when I was 4. So the loss of my mother, that's a memory on my spiritual heart. So the memory and the data collected there says I'm not important. My imagination, my image maker, image maker takes that memory and imagines my life from a viewpoint of I'm not important. And all the things that would go with I'm not important, right? Life is scary. There's a place to be fearful. When you see that connection and you tie those pieces together, it's absolutely no wonder why autoimmune issues would come up in my 20s. Because autoimmune, that's an immune system that doesn't recognize what it's supposed to be protecting, right? The immune system is meant to protect the body that it's living in. When the immune system is not working correctly, it doesn't recognize what it should be fighting and what it should be protecting. It's off. When I have an image maker, I have an imagination in my soul, in my spirit, that I'm not important, I'm not lovable because of something that happened when I was a kid. That's a stress response. That's a false information that my body is getting. False information. I'm not important. I'm not lovable. And so that is where, for me and for my clients now, we go to work. That's the one place that I really, really love to deep dive in with people, because I know that the diet, that the detoxing, that the marriage therapy, that the coaching on successful business and all of that, none of that will work if you have spiritual memories that are wounded, that are not healed. If someone who doesn't know me and doesn't know what I'm dealing with can tell me I see autoimmune conditions, I see anger, I see grief, I see fear in your energy. And by the way, as I went down that route of energy, I can tell you, we all have an energy field around us. There's an energy field. Like, we don't live without energy, right? We don't metabolize our food. We don't do anything without there being an energy source to make that happen. That's the energy field that we're all connected to. So that's your life force energy. In Chinese medicine, that's your qi. People who do Tai Chi, right? It's all about that managing and controlling and maximizing your energy field. So we have this energy field around us. When you are in fear and when you are stuck in stress, not only does it affect your immune system, not only does it affect your relationships, but it also draws from your life force energy. You're a consumer of energy. You're consuming. And that means your energy field is diminishing. When you get yourself out of that fear stress response and into love, when you heal that spiritual disconnection, when you heal those memories that are still in your spiritual heart, that data bank still remembers, when you heal that, you can start producing energy. You can start actually using your body the right way, using your emotions the right way, and your energy field then can grow. So rather than consuming it and diminishing it, you can actually add to it. That's your life force energy. We only get so much, right? At some point, if you use up your life force energy, then the quality of your life keeps diminishing until there is none left. That's what happens. Does it happen when you're 30? Does it happen when you're 70? Even if you live to 80 or 90, are you living a quality of life that it feels good to be in? Or are the last 30 years of pain, stress, loneliness, sadness, grief, anger, all the things that I was holding? So if no one had told me that, if no one had, and I really feel like things happen for a reason, right? So a friend tells me about this guy. I decide to make an appointment with this guy, and he gives me back this information, and it was powerful enough, and I had learned enough to go to take a look, to say, I want to know more about that. If that had not happened, I would still be doing a lot of the coping, a lot of the managing with my diet, a lot of the detoxing, probably in therapy after my marriage ended, all of that. And I wouldn't know that I was holding that. I wouldn't know that the wounding had happened at a spiritual level. I just wouldn't know, right? Especially because I'm a science person. My background has always been the science, like, let me read the study, let me do the research. So now we have the technology to marry the science with the spirituality, which is very exciting. So that's the missing link. Let me sum all of the last 20 minutes up for you. The missing link is the wounding in your spirit, where somewhere you disconnected from yourself based on things that happened you made a decision about yourself, or you're holding emotions about that and you're blocking love. It's always a deficit of love is causing a malfunction in some area of your life. So if you're not experiencing the health that you want, if you're not experiencing the love that you want in relationships, if you're not experiencing your success, all of that is got a root cause of a malfunction in your spiritual heart. That's it. That's how to sum it up. Okay? That's a lot of the work that I do. I have a program, Return, Restore, Renew, that goes deep, and I work twice a week with clients, and we dig deep on a lot of different areas. But this one spiritual piece, now that I'm trained and I use that as a part of that Return, Restore, Renew program, but I also am doing it just that spiritual piece, just that. That's a Healing Codes 12-week program, and we're starting that this week. If that interests you, if anything that I said makes sense, if you know you've been stuck and you think that that spiritual piece is the difference for you, then please leave me a comment and I'll tell you about it. Don't let that missing link go on longer in your life than it needs to. Just like I feel like, I don't know how, but I ended up with a session with Phil Kaplan, and I got the information that changed my life. And he was just willing to be really open with me. He was just willing to say, this is what I think. And I don't know you, but does this make sense? And of course it did. And then, well, here's where you need to go to work. And so I did. Do the same thing for yourself. Oh, it says Facebook user. I don't know who that is, but it says, thank you. I'm thankful to be working with you in the 12-week Healing Codes program. So it's somebody who's already in the program, which means it's one of my lovely clients. So thank you. All right. So have a great rest of your day. I'll be back on Wednesday. These episodes are Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays in the middle of the day. Okay. And they're always recorded. So if you can't catch it live, thank you. Thank you for saying hello, and I'll see you Wednesday. Have an awesome day. Ciao.